Welcome to this session about eye patterns. Today we're going to learn a very important concept about eye movements. And in NLP, eye patterns are really considered to be one of the core items that we utilize that helps us understand what's going on in our minds. So before I actually move on and talk a little bit more about eye patterns, I wanted to consider some things. Now, why do people move their eyes in all sorts of directions? Don't you think actually? Have you watched people? Yeah, watch them. Yeah, you talk to them, and people move their eyes in all directions, up, down, sideways, all over the place. Now, who's encountered a person, a family member, or a friend, or a colleague at work, maybe? Yeah, or if you're speaking to them, and they would look to the right, like this, and then say something, or they would remember something and they'll just defocus their eyes, or they'll probably start looking up, and then they will provide give you some information. Now what's going on there, right? Now imagine if you could see eye movements and get a broader range of behavior available to you, right? And using that behavior, you can keep the person interested in speaking to you. Or in business, yeah, if you're doing a negotiation or a sale and your clients were just not interested, wouldn't you like to change that situation? Well, eye patterns is quite a powerful technique that if you utilize them within a few minutes, it would give you the tools to make your conversations very, very easy and make it useful in most of the situations. So let's get started. I wanted to recap a bit because we're going to talk about some of these things later in the session today. Just a bit about NLP communication model. And when I had spoken to you about the NLP communication model, one thing that had jumped out was the internal representation, right? And what's an internal representation? Basically, any thing that um, we see an external event that comes in through our five senses, right? The sights, sounds, feelings, tastes, and smells. Now, we kind of have this tendency to represent themselves into our system, into our thinking, either in a visual way or in an auditory way. So this basically sounds, right? Kinesthetics more around feelings, olfactory and gustatory around taste and smells, and also we kind of think about our logic. So when I'd spoken about the NLP communication model, and this is just a recap. So everything that we experience, right, it goes through our five senses, goes through filters, and creates a representation within our body, right, within our mind. So not body, sorry, what am I saying? Yeah, so within our mind, and it represents in one of these five or six ways, right? Um, Also, this is an important thing to remember when we're talking about eye patterns. Also, last time I had spoken about sensory acuity and rapport. How observing closely, you can calibrate the movements of people, and those can include facial expressions, voice tones, body movements, eye movements, etc. So sensory acuity really helps us create that system within our minds to notice and observe closely and understand how the person is behaving, right? What's happening on their outside. When I talked about rapport, I talked about matching and mirroring, and using matching mirroring for body language, voice, breathing, etc. This kind of gives us some idea of. So what happens is, whatever we are learning from our previous sessions, we can now begin to utilize them in our in the future classes as well. Understanding the NLP communication model and the internal representation systems, and sensory acuity, how we can utilize that with rapport, and these are some of the things we will start using. So moving on, uh, I talked about our internal representation. Now we come to an important um, terminology or concept of modalities in NLP. When we talk about modalities, they're basically our how we the internal representations that I talked about. These kind of they're represented into our system, into our mind as a visual memory or a visual image, auditory sound, kinesthetic feeling, and another important thing about auditory digital. This is more um, around self-talk or logic. When we are thinking, so these four things will really be important for us to understand when we talk about eye patterns going forward. But modalities are really important, and they are the core within our within NLP. So anything that is visual, any memory that we have, or anything that we're thinking, if we're thinking in terms of pictures, that's visual modality. If we are thinking in terms of sound, so we listen to the sound of music or sound of birds. If we have a memory and that memory has a sound associated with it, so that's auditory, right? Now, if I have a memory that creates a feeling of an emotion, creates a feeling of happiness, joy, confidence, it can be a negative emotion as well. So now all that memories that are coming, they're the kinesthetic modality. Now, another thing about auditory digital is important because this is a new concept. Now, auditory digital means anything that is based on logic or anything that we are talking to ourselves. For example, um, if I asked you to remember the times table for seven, all right, now you will remember it, and you'll probably say, okay, 7 times 1 7, 7 times 2 14, 7 times 3 21, 7 times 4 28. Now what is this? This is a logical progression of the times table, right? Now you will probably be talking to yourself first in your mind, and then logically you will start saying. Now there are times where we will think about items, or things about things in our life that is based on logic. If I, or a process, I need to do this as step one, I need to do as step two, I need to do this as step three, things like that. So just example, for example, if I am driving a car, so first of all, step one, I need to get into the car. Step two, I need to start the ignition. Step three, I need to put on the gear. Step four, if it's an automatic, just hold the steering and go. Or if it is a manual, change the gear. So there are steps. So there is a logical way. So when you're thinking, so that's kind of a, a way of thinking and adapting to the things that are happening in our life. So um, then there are times where, in fact, I had somebody in a couple of years back. Whenever I used to talk to that person would actually interpret what I'm saying, and they will repeat what I'm saying. Okay, so this means that modalities are there are four modalities. That means visual, auditory, kinesthetic, auditory, digital. Okay, now I understand. So the person is always talking to themselves. So they are in that auditory digital mode, and that's kind of four modalities. Right now, when I start talking about eye patterns, let's do some introduction. Now, what exactly is eye pattern, right? Why this happens? So eye patterns actually they describe our movements, the movement of our eyes, right? And typically every time we are accessing our brain, we move our eyes in that particular direction, which facilitates using some a part of our neurology, right? So the mind and body are absolutely interconnected. So each time we access our visual memory, for example, we will move our moves. I will, if it's a visual memory, we are not going to look down and visualize it. We're probably going to look up. Uh, so and now, if it is an auditory or a memory of a sound, we probably our mind is wired in such a way that mind and body are connected in such a way that if it's something that we are trying to remember as sound, our eyes will actually naturally move towards the sides. So that's the idea behind the patterns of eye movements. And if you look at the diagram, right, this is basically uh, person who is actually, if you're looking at that person, right? Uh, so when they face you, that's how their eyes are moving. So it's not the you don't put yourself in the other person's shoes. In this case, you're just looking at the person in front of you, and if their eyes are moving towards the left, so that's what this means. So for a person themselves individually, they will be moving their eyes towards the right. But when you look into at them in front of them, right, you will feel that they are actually moving their eyes towards the left. Similarly, if they're trying to move, if they move their eyes towards the right, right, if from our perspective, that's what this means. So the diagram is how people look at you when they're facing you. And there are a couple of things that I wanted to, I will go into the details of each one of these items in the next couple of slides. But it's these, this basically diagram is for a normally organized right-handed person. Now, what does that mean? Normally organized. So if you're most of your work that you do is right-handed, right? Then you are normally organized as right-handed. That's kind of what it means. And there was a study that was done in United States, couple of I think around 1980s or 1990s, which they said that approximately 80% of the population of United States, and we can probably generalize it for the world, is 80% of population is right-handed. So this diagram is specifically for people who are right-handed. Now, if you are ambidextrous, or if you're left-handed, you can reverse it. And I'm going to talk about some tips around these different ways that you can utilize this. But for many left-handed people and some ambidextrous people, the eye movements are reversed. So it's for if you are left-handed, so if you are looking towards this side, so it can mean, so you just, it's a mirror image of of this photograph, of this picture. Okay. And it'll start making sense when I get into the details of this diagram. So if you see that each of this diagram has got some of these portions that I've written, so which is says constructed and recalled. Then there's something called VC, ACK, VR, AR, and AD. And I'll continue to. So what this means is, if a person, when the person is looking at you, and if their eyes are moving towards this direction or top left when you are looking at them, that means they are trying to create a memory in their head, right? Or so all of the left side is where your creation, your active imagination of creativity comes into it comes into being. Uh, these two, actually, K is more kinesthetic, without feelings, and this side is these four. If I specifically talk about these four, right hand side is more your you are remembering something from your past. Okay. So kinesthetic is more about how you, when you're accessing your feelings, and auditory digital is when you're doing a self-talk or you're thinking logically. Getting into that more detail, if I if I talk about VR or this side, right? If a person it's basically visual recall. So if you are remembering something from your memory or recalling things that you've seen before, then what happens is your eyes will naturally tend towards your right and to the top, and visually you are recalling. For example, if I asked you what was the color of the room you grew up in, and if you had to really remember it, your eyes will go up and you will start remembering, maybe it was light blue or white, or some what is the color of your bedroom now. Sometimes what happens is, if I immediately remember it, my eyes will not go up, it will defocus, right? But if you don't remember, if you have to really think about it and think about the color, and your actually eyes will go up, right? It will go up to this side, which is right from what you are looking at me, right? Now, what does your coat look like, or what was the color of your school uniform when we were in fifth grade? Some things like that. Now, when you are asking those questions, your mind is actually trying to remember, and it is naturally moving your eyes to a place where you can actually become, it's easier for you to remember, right? So your eyes don't generally tend to go this side on the top left. Okay. So top left for me, but when I'm looking from the front, it will go top right. Okay. So that's visual remembered in this diagram. If I move on, if I say visual constructed, now these are images of things that you've never seen before. Okay. So when you're making it up in your head, and you call it visual constructed. So for example, if I asked you a question, what would your room at your home look like? It was dark blue. And I will tend, because it is not dark blue, I know that it is not dark blue. I will tend to, maybe I will tend to first remember, okay, what was my color, what was room's color? Okay, it was light blue or light green. But now I have to think about it, and okay, so dark blue would look like that. So when I'm actually trying to create that image of my room as dark blue, my eyes, mind will automatically move my eyes towards the left, right? It will construct left from your perspective. So it will construct. So that's the idea. So that's how your eyes move. Now, if I give another example, if how would your dog look like if it had a head of an elephant? Or what would how would your car look like if it was fluorescent green? Right? Or how would your dress, what you're wearing right now, look like when you if it was dark pink? If it is so you have to imagine, you have to create that image in your mind. When you do that, your eyes will tend to look this side automatically, right? That's the idea. So in addition, some people access visually by defocusing their eyes. Now, if I had to ask you what you had breakfast, what did your breakfast look like? You might actually not even look up or down. You might just think, and your eyes will defocus, and you look at me and directly in my eyes and give me the answer. But what happens if you can calibrate the eyes, and you can look at it a bit more clearly? You'll see that my eyes will actually defocus, and when it remembers, it will come back to focus again. So the eyes normally stay in the center. So uh, when you're actually imagining some image in your head, when you're talking, automatically, unconsciously, your eyes will move towards the constructed side. Okay. Let's move on. Talk about auditory remembered or auditory recall. Right now, if you are remembering some sounds from your past experiences, uh, that you will naturally, your body will naturally your mind will naturally move your eyes to a direction which is this side. Okay, if I remember the sound of the door closing, or if I remember the sound of the last thing I said, if I remember the sound of my mother's voice yesterday, something like that. So my eyes naturally tend to move towards this side. Okay, because I'm a normally organized right-handed person, my eyes will naturally tend to move this side when I am thinking about the sound of the voice of my mom, or sound the voice of my kids, sound of the voice of a movie star that I watched maybe two weeks back. So it's generally moving towards this side automatically. Yeah, that's the idea. Now, if I similarly, if I think about auditory constructed, right, it's making up the sound. Now, how would the sound of your boss look like if he's talking like Mickey Mouse? And my eyes will generally tend to move this side. And this is very unconscious movement. So you can't consciously. You can train yourself consciously to not look at anybody while you're thinking. But in general, like 80% of the population, I would say, they will really move their eyes. And sometimes the eye movement are so subtle that you have to really calibrate yourself, use your sensory acuity to see where the eye moves. Sometimes the eye moves very fast. Okay, so suppose I asked you, what would my sound look like if I had the sound of Donald Duck? And you're imagining suddenly, if I had to imagine, my eyes will actually move to the side like this, right? It will move this side. What would a Swan Lake sound like if it were played on bagpipe? So when you're creating something in your head, if it's auditory, your eye movements go to the side. If it is constructed, it will go to the side. So you have to, if you keep the chart in front of you, and I'll talk about how you can utilize this. But that's the idea behind this. This is a very very common thing when you're feeling some emotions and when you're talking. So there are things that you can use based on your sensory acuity. You can probably see if a person is really feeling something very strongly. Their body movements change. Sometimes I've seen people breathe harder, and what also happens is their eyes actually move down. Their head is down when they are really either upset or sad. Sometimes you'll probably see their head tends to go down and their eyes go down on the right. From my side, it's my right, but if you're looking at me, it is going to the left. So uh, you generally look in this direction when you're accessing your emotions or feelings. An example could be, you can actually try, what does it feel like if I touch that wet rug, right? Or how does it feel if uh, the sand on my feet, or how does it feel to touch a wet cloth? If you can really reach your feelings, your eyes, you'll see your eyes going down and towards your right. The eyes going down, as from for the person, it will be towards his own right, but when you're looking at that person, it will be actually towards their left. Okay, and let's talk about auditory digital. Now, this is when you're talking to yourself, right? Or when you're having an internal dialogue, right? Now, if, for example, in US, they say, can you recite the Pledge of Allegiance? Or if you could recite the national anthem for your country, or if you could recite a favorite poem from your school, or if you could recite a song. Now, what happens is if you're remembering the words, and you're trying to recollect from your memory, right? It is very digital. It is either there or it's not there. You don't have to access your feelings. You don't have to access anything else. You just have to remember a times table, right? Now you remember it, but then you have to think about it, and your eyes naturally tend to go down and towards my left. But if you're looking at me, it will go towards the right. So in all, this eye pattern chart, if you can remember and see the movement of the eyes of people when they are talking, you can understand how they're thinking. Either their eyes keep going up, or keep going side, or keep going down. So you understand how they're thinking. So for example, I had um, a, a friend of mine who had come from a meeting with a senior uh, senior person in the team, and when I was asking him, okay, what's happened? What happened in the meeting? What did you? And all the time his eyes were going left or right, left or right, left or right. It wasn't going up or down. It was going left or right. And then I had just asked him, okay, what was it that you heard that was important? And immediately, without thinking, he started giving me the answer. So just by looking at the eyes, you can understand how that person thinks. Okay, and that gives you an idea. Okay, what kind of questions you can ask, how can you build this. So by understanding how people think, you can actually utilize that information for improving your rapport, improving your communication. And that brings me to the next slide, is how can we use them? So before you actually start using them really with people around you, I would actually do some practice. Okay, like I said last time, everything needs practice. Share this diagram with a friend. You can take a printout, create it with your hand. Doesn't matter how you do it. Share this diagram with a friend and practice, and we can ask questions. Some of the questions I have listed here, right? But there can be more. You can be creative. Ask questions and closely observe their eye movements. In fact, what you could do is you can give them the eye pattern chart, and you can give with questions and say, okay, are my eyes moving like this? And you'll be surprised if they say yes, right? And you can do the same. You can take a video and see in front of, you can take your own video and put a questions and see how your eyes are moving, right? So there are multiple ways to do it, and you can validate your thinking. Okay, when I talk about this subject, am I constructing, am I recalling, am I accessing my feelings, or is it auditory digital? So you can do that. Okay, you can utilize this once you're a bit more comfortable. You can utilize this information in your daily communication and build rapport. Right? NLP strategies is something that I'll be talking about in an advanced session. But eye patterns are really very useful to understand how people think, what kind of strategies they create to make decisions or to be motivated. Those kind of things. So you can use eye patterns for that. Some quick tips. To memorize this chart, you can consider this in alphabetical order from left to right. So if I go back here, in this chart, so it's constructed and it's recalled, right, left to right, right? So it's easier for you to remember its alphabetical order. Okay. AD is generally the direction where people comprehend time. So if I'm wearing my watch on my left hand, so that's probably where I'm going to, my eyes will go down as AD. Now, if that's AD, right? If that's AD for me, right? So the other side will be K, and everything around K is constructed, right? So everything on this side, if I'm watching on this side, right, it is constructed for me. If watching on this side is called for me. So AD is basically, if you're wearing a watch, this is a tip, right? If you're wearing a watch on your left hand, usually that's where you will be recalling everything when you're thinking about eye movements. Another one is there are certain people who do not directly look towards the VR or AR direction. Basically, that means that they don't look towards a particular direction at all. Okay. Now, when that happens, they might be actually talking to themselves. For example, I had spoken about a friend of mine who would always talk to himself and then come back to you, then answer. So this is also called synesthesia, but you have to understand, if to wait and see if they're recalling, if it is they're doing something beforehand, right? Now, when can it fail? Now, some people have don't look to talk rule, right? So if you are sitting in front of them, you can actually detect subtle eye shifts. They will not look at you, but if they're looking to the left or to the right, you can still detect the certain eye shifts to left, right, top, down. So, and some people move their eyes very quickly, right? So you need to be you need to calibrate them. People may be right-handed, but will be still reverse organized. So this you'll need to figure out slowly by asking more questions. Are they really right-handed, or and the chart is reversed, or the other way around, right? So it is usually the thing that if a person is writing with his right hand, they are right-handed. That's how we kind of take it. Talk about watches in there. So if people are putting their watch on the right hand, right, but they're still using they're still right-handed, so the chart will still be applicable for a normally organized right-handed person. Now, the last thing, some people are really unable to look at a particular direction. So it might be because of they had some trauma in their past or some phobia. They can't really recall certain events. So as soon as they try and recall, something. So if they're trying to recall something, your mind tends to not let them watch in that direction at all. The eye doesn't go there. Now, for those people, these eye patterns may not be useful. That's all I had for today. This is a very important concept. A lot of practice is given to this eye patterns. When I'm doing my NLP class, I usually ask people to practice it at least for a couple of days and tell me what's going on. So this new information you've received, utilize this information. I will share the presentation with you shortly, and you can use this to create. First, observe how are people talking. Are they actually looking up, looking down, looking left, looking right? um, it's 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 very important to understand how people think before you can actually share your feedback or share your inputs. Now, if a person, like I said, rapport, people who are like each other, right? So it's a very, very useful tool to have in your pocket for building rapport. A person is always talking about looking up, then you know that he's creating images in their head. So you can say, okay, what does it look like? What did you see? Those kinds of things, right? If a person is always looking left, right, on the same axis, right? You can always say, okay, what did you hear? Those kinds of things. So it's useful to have this information beforehand as a non-verbal communication tool, and create that rapport and get the results you want. What questions do you have?
Hi, this is Nainur. So thanks, Chanda, for sharing all this. It really helps. What about, does NLP have any techniques while we are sleeping? We also do the rapid eye movements and observing a lot of things from the memory and all that. So does NLP also covers this type of section in future classes or so and so on? That's my question.
What kind of outcome are you expecting if you're looking at sleeping, for example? What outcome would you be expecting from that?
This is more like from a understanding someone's psychology and their
So
pain points,
yeah.
and maybe how we can able to help them in by understanding their sleep pattern in that rapid eye movement phase and so on.
Yes. So it's the eye movements don't change when the person is sleeping. If they are still sleeping, or if they have got your eyes closed and you're still trying to visualize, your eyelids will still move up. Okay, and if you're listening to something when your eyes are closed, your eyelids will still move. So the patterns of the eye movements doesn't change if the eyes are closed or open. It's easier to figure out where a person is moving, is looking, when the eyes are open, but the pattern is the same.
Okay, thank you.
Did I answer your question, Nana?
Yes, I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so next week.
Thank you, Chanda. My question is there. I don't know whether we can get that answer. Can we find out if suppose somebody is lying and we can observe their eyes and we can detect it that he is lying or he is telling truth?
Um, Good question, actually. This has been utilized. So if I open the eye pattern chart again, so if you want to know if the person is trying to tell you something from the memory, or something from, or creating something from their, so creating something, yes, an initial assessment can be made if the person is actually recalling something from their past, or saying something constructing, but it is not the final assessment. So you can create that as initial assessment. Definitely, a lot of times I've seen this in interviews as well. A lot of people see this as a way to find out if person is saying right, the truth or not. However, if you know that you are going to be saying something that is uh, false, of providing false information, you can actually move your eyes to the left or to the right and say those things. So if you're consciously doing it, you can cheat the patterns. So there should be other ways to get this information as well. On the outset, yes, you can make an initial assessment, but a lot of people today, with so much information available on NLP, eye patterns, available everything on YouTube, people who have that manipulation mindset can figure out ways to cheat the system. So the I answer to it is yes. You can figure out if they are saying truth or not, but it depends on the context as well.
Thank you, Chandra.
Thank you. Did I answer your question?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
All right, Chandra.
Yes, Harsh.
Yep, for sure. So obviously, as per what the chart shows, that there is two distinct areas. One's called the recalled area, one's called the constructed area. And like if this is a pattern or a chart that's available, I'm sure a lot of interviewers would be trained to get these kind of things, or to get them think the way you just mentioned that you have your classes and stuff in that case. Um, if there's as a person who's looking for a job, and there's
Mhm.
and someone who's new into their career would obviously would be being interviewed so many multiple times. Is it a pattern that if I was to say that while I'm being interviewed, I'm asked a question, I kind of have an answer, but not an experienced answer, but you have an answer, so you kind of have to construct that answer, and it's an important question
Mhm.
that you wish to answer. So if I was to not show that I'm constructing an answer and I have an experience, obviously my the content of my answer will definitely tell them exactly how good I am at it or not. But if they're looking for
Mhm.
something like more of an experienced person, but I want that
Mhm.
job, so if I was to move my eye movements in both fashion, let's say for example in recalled as well, for a half a second or a second I move to recalled, and then I move back again to constructed, or I start with constructed and then go to recalled. What would give them an answer that's suggesting that yes, my motive is to prove that I have an experience on it? So then in that
Mhm.
case, what would be the better pattern to work with? Recalled and then constructed, or constructed and recalled, or this doesn't make a difference at all?
See, first of all, I want you to remember everything that I'm teaching you or telling you about NLP. It has to be within the bounds of ecology.
Sure.
Okay, so if secondly, you need to understand that perception is projection. So if you are thinking on those lines, that's your
Mm,
perception that is going to project out. Okay, so that's
mm,
perception is projection is unconscious. Okay, so it
right.
will automatically. So the other person, if you are honest, honest about what you're trying to share,
Mm, mm, mm.
you have your ecology is primary on your mind. That's if that's the perception you have, that will project, right?
Okay. Right.
Um, so if you have manipulation in your mind based on what you've learned,
Mm.
that manipulation will project. Mhm. Sooner or later, they will know that you are either creating it or not. So they will have if that's the thing. I have had this experience. Okay, even
Yeah,
before
so
I
my
learned
motive,
NLP.
yeah, my
Yeah.
motive is not to cheat the guy. My motive is to, I've done so well. I've got like six questions. I've done very well in five. It's this one question that I know that probably
Mhm.
could keep me out. And I'm not trying to fool the person. I have an understanding of what this question is. Let's say, for example, what is NLP? So I know what NLP is in general as a holistic view, but I don't know in details of it. Right.
Mhm.
So obviously, if they ask me a detailed question, I'm going to fail at it, obviously. But I'm trying to give him an answer where I have an experience with you, but I have to still construct because I have to pick things from here and there and then together form an answer.
Right.
So in that case, I'm not fooling the person, but I'm also not being able to answer the question 100% in that case.
Yes. Yeah. So this is not the only way to determine if you have
Hmm,
provided the
hmm.
truth or false, right?
Sure.
It's
Hmm.
an initial assessment.
Yep. Yep.
So that's what I would say. So the people who are doing interviews, they would have many more other things on their,
Surely. Yeah.
right? So uh, even if you try to do just this by putting everything on your recalled side and answering, they might still not be able to figure it out. So there is no sure shot. Um, there's not a sure shot trick
Hmm,
or
hmm,
a
hmm,
technique
hmm.
or a solution
Yeah,
for that.
there wouldn't be obviously, and end of the day, like you mentioned, ecology is what it is, so they would come to know about it. But it's just about how well you fare at it is what
Yes.
I'm talking about.
Uh, Correct. So you can also use matching and mirroring. It's not by building rapport, and I will talk about a bit more about language skills in the coming weeks.
Hmm,
That can
hmm.
also help you build rapport and
Well,
share what you know, how you know, so and get the results you want. So that will also help.
cool. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Thank you. I've answered your question. Any other questions? So next Sunday, I'm going to talk about more about representational systems. So it's more around internal representations that we talked about today, the four modalities, how we can use our language, conscious use of language, with the understanding of the representational systems, auditory, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and auditory digital. We can combine both of these together to start creating rapport and helping people understand our what we are talking about and how we are able to share more, right? How we can express ourselves in a language that is easily understood by the other person. So that's the focus for next Sunday. That's all for today. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.